Before you watch this video, it's really important for you to understand that all the people involved in this completely believe all the events that happened truly happened to them. So welcome to another episode of So They Say. Today we're looking at an exorcism that happened in Stanford back in the 90s. To be able to do this video, I've agreed that I won't name the family, I won't name the road or the house, and I've changed the boy's name as well. So in 1994, a husband and wife and their 2-year-old son and their 4-year-old son move into a normal house in Stanford, and soon they start to have a run of some really bad luck. 3 months after moving in, the mum falls down the stairs and she breaks her arm, and she says she actually felt like someone pushed her. Not only just that happening, 6 weeks later they find their 2-year-old Jack Russell dead at the bottom of the stairs. And if that's not enough, just a few weeks later on Christmas Eve, while they're sitting there watching the television, the Christmas tree just bursts into flames. Now normally we'd say yes, we know that Christmas tree lights can be a little bit dodgy, but these were not actually plugged in at the time, and the whole tree went up. Lucky enough the husband was able to get the tree out the house and no one was hurt. In March in 1995, the day before Jason's birthday, the family were woken up by Jason screaming in his bedroom, and they run in there, and Jason says he's had a bad dream and he feels as if someone has been trying to drag him out of the bedroom window. The next day on Jason's birthday, they actually find some bruises on Jason's ankles. Initially the wife turned around and blames the husband for being a little bit too heavy-handed trying to get Jason back into the bed, and Jason says it wasn't daddy, and the husband's like, I didn't touch him, he got back in bed on his own, there's nothing to do with me at all. And strangely enough, all the photos taken on Jason's birthday were all blurred. Everyone else was in focus on Jason's birthday, but all Jason's face was blurred in all of the photos. Over the next few months, Jason has a lot of nightmares and night terrors, and the family decided to take him to a doctor. The doctor says actually at this age it's quite common for children to suffer from night terrors and night traumas, and he'll refer him to a sleep specialist. Now the doctor, they took him to the sleep specialist, and Jason was examined and whatever they do at a sleep specialist, and they couldn't find nothing wrong. They said, look, it is his age, he'll probably grow out of it. And it could be that because they've just moved into a new house, it is quite common for children to have nightmares of they're unsettled, they're not quite settled into their new home, and they can trigger these sort of night terrors and horrible dreams that they have. And this sort of fits in because a lot of Jason's dreams were of somebody trying to take him out of the house as well. In June 1995, the husband and wife are sitting downstairs watching the television when they hear Jason scream from his bedroom. They start to run up the stairs, and as they do so, all the lights and the power cut off in the house, and the light bulbs actually blow. They run into Jason's room, and Jason's laying on the floor with a deep cut to his forehead. And Jason says he's been thrown out of his bed. The dad notices that there's a broken lamp by Jason's bed, and he turns around and says, I think Jason fell out of bed, landed on the lamp, broke it, and that's what caused all the power to blow in the house. And Jason's saying that why doesn't none believe me, none believes me, that he feels that someone threw him out of his bed. And we're talking about a real young lad here, and that's what he's trying to say. He's getting quite upset that no one's actually believing him. Over the next few months, Jason actually moves into his mum's bedroom and sleeps with his mum, and his dad actually goes and sleeps on the sofa downstairs. But his dad starts suffering from a really bad back and starts taking sort of medication for his back problem. And by August, his back is so bad that he decides he's actually going to sleep on Jason's bed. Even though it's smaller, it's actually more flat and comfortable than what the sofa had been. That night, Jason's dad was going to have one of the worst night's sleep ever. As he was trying to get to sleep, he kept tossing and turning, couldn't really get comfortable. And around about 4 o'clock in the morning, he was woken up by a loud bang, and he jumps out of bed, and if you're thinking that something's happened in the house, he runs to the door, the bedroom door, he tries to open it, and he feels this something's pulling it back from the other side, and he can't get out. Finally, he bursts out the door, he runs around, and everyone in the house is completely asleep. As he goes back into Jason's bedroom, he finds that the bedroom is icy cold, and it had been a really hot day outside. It had been over 25. It was the middle of the summer, and yet the bedroom was really cold compared to the rest of the house. The rest of the house was still hot from the day's heat, but his bedroom was really cold. Jason's dad gets back into bed. He's left the bedroom door open to try and let some of the warmth of the house come in and warm up the bedroom. But for the rest of the night, he keeps having these little dreams of people trying to attack him in the bedroom. There's so much so that he keeps waking up all the time, and he kept restless, and he's thinking, is it the bedroom? Is this why Jason's having these nightmares? Is it, Is the bed uncomfortable? All these sort of things are running through his head. What could be causing Jason to have these nightmares in this room? But finally, Jason's dad actually puts it down to the medication he was on for his back problems that was making his sleep quite bad, and these sort of like hallucinating dreams that he was having. Things actually get better for the next few months, and Jason actually returns to sleep in his own bedroom. And then it comes to December 1995. Jason started school back in September, and come up to the Christmas period, he started getting involved in all the Christmas decorations within the school and getting really excited about the build up to Christmas. And during the school period, they made a Kris Kringle. Kris Tingle. It's an orange with candle stuck in it and a red ribbon around it. So Jason was really happy. They'd done a little service at school and he brought it home. And he said to Mum, can I put this by my bedroom window? He's really proud of it, of this thing. His mum said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So Jason puts it out by his bedroom window. So just as Jason goes to bed, he asks his mum to light the candle. The mum lights the candle, he blows it out, then gets into bed, and his mum reads him a bedtime story like normal, then kisses him on the forehead, and then Jason says, don't forget to leave my door open. Jason keeps reminding them to leave his bedroom door open. Mum and Dad go to bed about 11 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock they go in and they just have a little peek around the door to see if Jason was asleep. And he was asleep, but the dad noticed he's a little bit restless. He's moving around in the bed a little bit, but they think nothing of it and they go back to bed. Just an hour later, they're woken up by Jason screaming in his bedroom. The mum and dad run into the room, and the dad's first in there, and he sees Jason laying on the floor having a fit or a seizure, and it's so bad that Jason actually wets himself. Jason's dad picks him up and runs down to the car and takes him straight off to hospital. While they're there, the doctors can't find nothing wrong with him, and by that time he's got to the hospital, he's come out of his seizure and he has no memory of what's just happened. And at the same time, back home, his mum has stayed there because they've got the little son that she had to stay there to look after, and she decides that she's got to clean up Jason's wee off the floor. And as she's cleaning around on the floor, she notices just under the bed was the Kris Tingle that Jason had made and had brought home. And she picks it up, and as she picks it up, it's like mush. Her hands collapse through it, and she looks at it and it's all covered in green mould, even though it was perfect just a few hours before when they put it onto the windowsill. And this completely freaked the mum out, and she couldn't explain what had happened. Over the next few months, Jason had more tests at the hospital, and again it just come back that he was having extreme night terrors, and they gave him some medication to help him to sleep, but no, these terrors, they still keep happening. Jason's health was actually deteriorating. He was losing a lot of weight and always seemed to have this real heavy cold with him all the time. But by spring, March 1996, Jason's health just started to pick back up again, and the seizures were not as common. And he'd actually started having some school friends over to play in his bedroom, and just like a normal kid. And I know as myself as a child, I had friends over after school and we played, and just like what Jason was doing, and everything seemed to be quite normal. And so he was still having fits, but they were getting less and less common. While Jason was at school, his mum started actually hearing sounds as if someone was in Jason's bedroom, and there was a lot of banging and shuffling around. And sometimes she'd creep up there and have a look, and and she's like, no, it's got to be next door, or it could be like a mouse or a rat or something like that she could hear. But she was never convinced. She always felt as if she was trying to convince herself that it wasn't something different. And in the back of her mind was playing tricks, and she's thinking, is it a ghost, is this house haunted, all this sort of stuff. But you can sort of understand that there's some strange things. But one thing the mum did notice, Jason's bedroom and a lot of the house smelt of smoke. And it was like a burning sulphur smell, and in Jason's bedroom it was actually quite strong. And when she spoke to her husband, they said, well, what we'll do, we'll check all over the house. We couldn't find nothing, so they actually got a load more fire detectors and put them all around the house, just in case there's something electrical burning out that they weren't sure of, and if the fire started they'd be notified really, really quickly. But no, the smell was actually quite potent sometimes. Jason's room was actually the worst room for the smell, so much so that Jason's dad actually completely redecorated it in hope that he'd get rid of the sulphury smell in there, but it had no effect. After a few days the smell was back, and it was actually stronger than it had been beforehand, and Jason said it smelled like fireworks. And also during this time, Jason was moaning that when he came home from school, His toys had been moved around in his bedroom and they weren't where he had left them the night before. He'd been playing a game and he set his figures up to how he wanted them, and he'd come home from school and everything had been changed around. His mum swears that she didn't touch them, they haven't moved them. Before Jason went to school in the morning, he'd say, "Don't touch my toys," and she wouldn't touch them. But when he come back, he always said that his toys had been moved around. Moving into December, the Christmas build-up started and Jason actually started getting a bit more worried. He was worried that the same thing may happen again. He's making that link between Christmas last year, Christmas this year, and as kids do, they start worrying that something horrible could happen again. And his mum, dad, no, nothing's going to happen. You're fine. You're fine. But they weren't ready for the events that were about to happen to them. On December the 17th, Jason's school went to the local church and they all sung Christmas carols. And Jason had a great time. That evening he come back home and he entertained his mum and dad by singing all the Christmas songs he could remember from doing the concert. And it was a lovely family time. Then Jason got ready and he went to bed. At 2 a.m. Jason was woken up by someone pulling the covers off of him and started trying to drag him towards the window. He heard a deep voice, a very, very deep, evil voice. He couldn't work out the words, but he couldn't see nobody, but he could just feel someone dragging him more and more towards the window. Jason's dad comes running into the room and he describes it like this. He was being pulled up to the window by nothing. He couldn't be doing it himself as his back wasn't even touching the floor. He was screaming, "Mum, Mum." I grabbed him by his arms and tried to pull him back down onto the bed, and something hit me right into my chest and it just felt like it was trying to stop me. His mum said, "I don't know what to say." He was halfway up the window. His dad had his hands pulling him back onto the bed. The room stuck as smoke and sulphur and it was so strong. His dad was just shoved back by something and then it just all went quiet. Next door also heard the commotion and they called the police. And the police come to the house and seeing the distress in the house, they actually took Jason's dad in for questioning. Once I was at the police station, the police were actually very understanding, and once they went through and heard about Jason's night terrors, and they were quite satisfied that nothing was going on, but they did arrange a social service call to come around to see if there's any support they could help the family with. The mum and dad were in complete shock and they couldn't put it down to night terrors, but they completely lost for answers. Over the next few months, Jason's health started to go back downhill again. And by February 1997, he was taking many days off of school, and most nights he was having the night terrors again, screaming and really hot sweats. And they said they'd touch him on his skin and it was just like really hot, burning hot, and he was soaked, his bed was soaked, and they had to change his bed covers every day because it was always soaked in sweat. But as a treat, on the 1st of March, Jason was allowed to have a friend to come over and play. They played in his bedroom and they come down, they had dinner, and then it was time for Jason's friend to go home. And his friend went home and Jason started getting ready for bed. And at that time, Jason's dad took off Jason's t-shirt to put his bedclothes on and noticed Jason had all these circles and these circular bruises all over his back. And then Jason was like, I don't know I've done it. I haven't done nothing at school, I haven't fallen over or anything like that. Jason's dad goes down and speaks to his wife and he's quite concerned, and his wife was like, "Oh, I don't know, I haven't seen anything on him, I haven't seen him falling over or anything. It must be something he's done at school. He may have leaned against something that may be really hot, or something, he's fallen against something on the school wall." They couldn't think of any other explanation for it. By 10 p.m, Jason was sound asleep in his bed. His mum and dad were downstairs watching the telly. All of a sudden, the power went out, and the first they heard wasn't from Jason, it was from Jason's younger brother. And Jason's younger brother shouts out, "What's wrong? What's happening?" They said, "Don't worry, it's just a power cut." He went, "No, what's wrong with Jason?" Jason's mum and dad ran upstairs. Normally Jason's bedroom door was wide open, but it was rammed shut. There was a light coming from underneath the door. Jason's dad was pushing against the door trying to open it up, and he describes it as like a strong wind. When you're trying to open up the door against the wind, or you're trying to hold it from being blown shut, it's like that sort of force. So finally he was able to burst into the room. Jason was laying on the bed shaking and the room stunk with smoke. At first his dad thought it was a fire. That's where the light was coming from. But the light was actually coming from the window itself, not from outside the window, but the actual window. The dad tried to pick Jason up, but Jason kicked out and screamed at his dad, and his mum come running into the room. So there's a black shadow over the bed. We're both now struggling with Jason, and she says that she actually see that this black shadow came out of Jason's mouth as he was screaming. No matter how much they tried, they couldn't get Jason off the bed. Mum and Dad said there was a horrible sound in the room, and it was so painful that it was actually like hurting their ears. And Jason's dad said Jason was actually burning hot. It was so hot that he had to let go of him. He couldn't hold on to him no longer. Jason was drenched in sweat, and both the mum and dad described Jason's face as changing to something really old and almost evil looking. And you got to remember, we're talking about a little young child that is able to fight off two adults that can't even pick him up off the bed. And now that task should be really easy. The light from the window was getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And all of a sudden there's a real bright flash. And everything just went dead silent. Jason was still shaking on the bed. The smell started to subside and Jason's face started going back to normal. This was actually the first time that Jason's mum and dad decided that this may actually be something completely paranormal and nothing to do with night terrors at all. In the morning, Jason's dad decided to go to speak to the local church. As he went there, he's thinking they're just going to laugh at him. They tell him to stop watching too many films like The Exorcist and all this. But Jason's dad was surprised that the church actually took him very seriously. And they actually said a priest will go around to his house like that day. At 5 p.m, the priest arrived at the home to meet Jason. They actually met in the living room to start off with. Jason still looked quite unwell, and the priest sat there and spoke to Jason for about 10-15 minutes, just getting to understand what he was like as a child. And he said, "Can I see the bedroom?" Jason and his mum and dad took the priest up to the bedroom. Jason was actually quite excited to show the priest his bedroom. He wanted to show him some of the toys he had. Jason entered the bedroom first, and his mum and dad, and Jason looked quite excited. As the priest walked through the door, Jason completely changed. He started shouting for the priest to get out. Jason fell to the floor and started trying to grab at the priest's feet and trying to pull the priest down to the floor and shouting, get out, and trying to push, and he was getting more and more violent. As he became more violent, the room started to smell of sulphur again, really strong, choking smell of sulphur. His dad said it was getting to the back of his throat. Jason started trying to kick out at the priest, try and push him out. The priest just decided to back out of the room. And as he did, Jason completely stopped and then just went into a fit on the floor. But this sort of soon passed and everything just went completely calm. The priest turned around and said that he was going to go and take some advice and he'd be in contact really soon. But Jason's mum was so worried about her son, she picked him up and took him up to the hospital. They actually kept Jason in overnight just for observation, and they couldn't find nothing wrong with him again. And again, they turned around and said it's down to night terrors. That's all they kept saying, night terrors, night terrors. And Jason's mum was just like, it's more than that. He just seemed a completely different person, almost like he had sort of like a schizophrenic. So he was a completely different person, something that was changing his whole personality for some reason. But the only thing the hospital said, now Jason's just slightly underweight, but apart from that, he's in good health. And she's saying, but no, he's been sweating, he's been burning up, he had no temperature or anything. And so because of that, the next day, they let him home by lunchtime. It wasn't long after that they got home that the priest turned up with another priest and said they'd actually spoken to the bishop and they'd taken advice, and the bishop's conclusion was that the house could do with cleansing and a blessing, and that was the same for Jason as well. Both his parents were at wit's end and they were just like, whatever. They've gone past the point of believing that nothing strange was going on after what they'd seen, and especially that the mum seen this black smoke come out of Jason's mouth. She knew deep down that something really bizarre was going on in her life. Jason was upstairs with his mum and dad playing in the bedroom, just laying on the bed playing with his toys, while the priests were downstairs going around and blessing and cleansing the house downstairs.
The power of Christ compels you!
As the priest started to make their way up the stairs, Jason started screaming and started getting very angry, telling the priest to go away and that he was in pain and he was hurting. As the priest got closer and closer to the door, Jason started to fit on the bed, and at the same time the strong smell of smoke and sulphur entered the room, and the light that Jason's dad had seen at the window before started coming through brighter and brighter. And again, it wasn't coming from the outside the window, it was the window itself, the window frame, the glass, everything was glowing white hot. Jason was still laying on the bed having a fit. He's burning up, he was sweating, and for the first time words were coming out of Jason's mouth that no one understood, words that no one had ever heard before, either they were completely made up or a language that no one understood. Jason's face was turning old again, old and evil, evil, and his eyes were getting really, really dark. The mum looked round towards the window and it was so bright she couldn't even look at it, and she looked back at her son, and at the same time her son was so hot she had to let go. It was burning her hand. One of the priests turned around and walked up to the window where the light was coming from and started saying something and telling whoever it was to get out, go, leave. And the light started to fade and fade until it was quite dim, and Jason started to calm down, a lot calmer on the bed. Both priests walked over to Jason and started doing a blessing, a cleansing over Jason, basically an exorcism over Jason, to excise him of whatever spirit was possessing him at this point. And Jason's dad, wants to make it really clear that his son weren't spinning around and vomiting green stuff and all this. He said his son was in pain and distress and was crying, was fitting, and they were so concerned for their son that they thought he could even pass away. He was in such a state. The priest carried on doing their blessing over him, and he became very, very calm and then very, very sleepy. And the priest just turned around and said, "Let him sleep, it's all over now." Jason's mum and dad were completely unconvinced of all what had just gone on. They were in complete shock. The priest went downstairs and they said, "Honestly, everything's going to be okay." And the mum and dad was just like, "What the hell has just happened?" And they said, "We've just removed an evil spirit that your son's been in contact with within the room, but it's gone now, and it won't be coming back." Jason woke up the next day with no memory of what happened. And actually, from that day on, Jason never had a fit again. Jason's health completely improved, but his mum and dad were still left traumatised by what happened in that house. So much so that by the end of that year, they'd moved out. Speaking to Jason's dad, he's convinced his son has no memory and has never spoken about the events. Apart from one thing, Jason's older now and he has his own son. Last Christmas, his son brought home a Chris Tingle from school. Jason made him keep it outside the front door of the house. Another thing that we can add to this is that, without naming the house, we do know that in the 70s, a 7-year-old girl fell to her death out the bedroom window that Jason was using in his bedroom. Now, what we don't know is, did this girl go through the same thing as Jason? Is there something in that room that caused that? Or did someone push the girl out the window and her spirit has remained there really angry? Now, to put my 2 pence worth in, it's a really difficult case. Speaking to the people involved, they truly went through this. Our interpretations can be completely different. We could think that, especially coming from the mental health side of it, was he suffering some sort of temporary schizophrenia? No, he didn't go on to be diagnosed with things like ADHD or anything like that. He was completely healthy. He went on to live a completely healthy life. But in childhood, our minds can play tricks on us and you can really have strong beliefs. But the family say that Jason was completely normal. He didn't watch like horror films. He was too young for all that. He never spoke about ghosts and all this sort of stuff. So the night terrors were something quite unusual, and it only happened from the day they moved into that house that Jason's sleep pattern was different. And I said, I'd go back to what the doctor said, that when people do move from house to house, especially young children, they do suffer from night terrors. Even myself, I remember moving from Willshill to where I live now, and apparently I was having night terrors. I remember bizarrely waking up and mum and dad had to put my feet in bowls of water to try and wake me up because I was having these night terrors. So night terrors really do happen, and so we could brush it off as that, but we need to take into account other things. The smell of sulphur, the smoke, the light, all this sort of stuff adds up to something we can't explain, and we'll never explain it because we didn't see it. But all those involved who did see it, the priest, the mum, the dad, they all know or believe it truly happened. I hope you enjoyed this one. It is slightly different. It's quite an emotional story because you're talking about a young child. But yeah, it's one to think about, and I'll leave you with that, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.